Shalom. What we're going to be discussing today is basically that being an Israelite is a nationality, not a religion. When you look in the Bible, in every instance in the Bible, you can see that the strangers, sojourners, Gentiles, and anybody who wasn't an Israelite was never called Israelites, even if they were with Israel and they were keeping the commandments of Israel. So, one scripture that people may use to try to prove that Gentiles were called Israelites is in Esther 8:17. So let's go there. Esther 8:17. It says, "And in every province, and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them." So it says the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So they were. It sounds like they were trying to do things the Jews were doing. But even when you look at this scripture, you got to look at all these scriptures in context. Okay, you can't just run with one scripture and make a doctrine out of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look in the Bible and see instances where people were with Israel, keeping the commandments of Israel, but they were never called an Israelite. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 6. 1 Samuel 21, verse 6. It says, "So the priest gave him hollow bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before Yahuwah, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before Yahuwah, and his name was Doeg and Edomite, the chiefs of the herdmen that belonged to Saul." So notice this man was the chiefs of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. He was with the Israelites. Okay? But he was not called an Israelite. He made a distinction. He was called an Edomite. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 9. 2 Samuel 12, verse 9. "Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of Yahuwah to do evil in his sight? Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon." So notice, this man Uriah, he was actually from another, it says he was from the Hittites. He was a Hittite, so he's from another nation, but he fought with Israel. He stayed with Israel. So even though he was with Israel and all that, he was not considered an Israelite. He was still called by his true nationality, which was a Hittite. So as you can see, the other nations, they were called by their nationality. Let's go to Ruth 1:22. Ruth 1:22. Ruth 1:22. It says, "So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest." So Naomi, it says Ruth was Naomi's daughter-in-law. Now Ruth married into Israel, and she stayed with Israel and all that, but she wasn't considered an Israelite. She was still called by her nationality, which was a Moabite. She was a Moabitess. 2 Samuel 1, verse 2. 2 Samuel 1, verse 2. It says, "And it came even to pass on the third day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head. And so it was when he came to David that he fell to the earth and did obeisance. And David said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he said unto him, Out of the camp of Israel am I escaped." So this man came out from the camp of Israel. He's fighting with the Israelites. "But let's see if he was called an Israelite." Verse 13. "And David said unto the young man that told him, Whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger and Amalekite." So he was called an Amalekite. He was from another nation. He did not call himself an Israelite. Okay, let's go to the New Testament now. Acts chapter 10. We're going to go to Acts chapter 10, verse 1. Acts 10:1. It says, "There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man and one that feared Elohim with all his house, and gave much alms to the people, and prayed always, and prayed to Elohim always. So notice this man was, he prayed, he feared Elohim, so he's keeping the commandments and all that, but he was still called an Italian, not an Israelite. This man was not called an Israelite. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 14, verse 17. Zechariah 14, verse 17. Zechariah 14:17 says, "And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth into Jerusalem to worship the King Yahuwah of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith Yahuwah will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. There shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles." So notice that these other nations that are going to be in the new kingdom are going to have to keep the commandments and stay with Israel, but they're not going to be called Israelites. No, it still calls them Egypt, the families of Egypt. Okay, so as you can see, when we look through the entire Bible, in every instance in the Bible, we had to get more than one scripture. You can see that the strangers, sojourners, the Gentiles, and the other nations, they were never called Israelites.